If I told you that there was a diet where you could eat bacon, eggs, and other high-fat foods every single day for every single meal, and not only was it considered a health food, but it led to better physical and mental performance, along with a reduction in cancer rates and all-cause mortality, along with being leaner and burning more fat. Would that sound too good to be true? What's the worst that could happen, right?
You die of heart failure the year before.
How?
High cholesterol.
From what?
Too much bacon.
Hey guys, it's Minney, and today we're going to talk about the Ketogenic Diet, which is obviously one of my all-time favourite topics to talk about. This kind of got inspired by the anti-carbohydrate stuff I keep seeing online recently, and it just keeps doing my head in every time I see it. It doesn't matter how intelligent a person is, it doesn't matter how renowned a person is. When people come out with claims that are just absolutely falsified about this diet hack, it boggles my mind that you can't read a fucking biology book. Like, what? So, today we're going to go through the ketogenic diet, what it's good for, what it isn't good for, and should you use it or not. A ketogenic diet is a diet that forces the body to go into ketosis for prolonged periods of time. This state is entered by either long periods of fasting, around 72 hours, or avoiding carbohydrates and keeping protein at a minimal intake to minimize blood glucose levels. The process of ketosis is where your body will start breaking down your fat tissue to utilize as ketones instead of relying on its default energy source, which is glucose. Some people like to say that ketones are our body's fourth energy source, though technically you could also apply that to alcohol as well. And since you can also apply that to alcohol, just because your body can use it as an energy source, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should. As I alluded to earlier, the ketogenic diet is a diet that's incredibly high in fats, very low in protein, and extremely low in carbohydrates. Now, if you look at the food groups as they exist in an actual world, this eliminates almost all food groups. This has the potential to make it one of the most restrictive diets in history. And since flexible dieting in the literature is associated with higher rates of fat loss, and rigid dieting, which you would have to be a rigid dieter to stick to this, is associated with less fat loss, more binges. You can do the math of why I believe that the ketogenic diet's restrictions will only be a burden to most people on their fat loss journey. So forget adherence, let's say you stuck to it 100%. What does the science say about weight loss, mental performance, physical performance, sport, cancer rates, and all that other goodness that ketogenic diet proponents love to go on about? Well, for weight loss, there's no substantial evidence when calories are controlled in studies that a ketogenic diet has any advantage over a carbohydrate-rich diet. In fact, there may even be a detriment. Excessive dietary fat can actually slow down fat loss progress because dietary fat is so easily utilized and stored as body fat because it requires less work turning fat tissue into fat tissue. It's about 20% easier than carbohydrates. So using this hypothesis, you can see that higher fat intakes are probably associated with slower rates of fat loss. One supposed advantage of ketosis is that whilst you're in ketosis, your ketones suppress your appetite. Well, a high protein diet also suppresses your appetite too. So it's not a unique advantage to ketosis. Another claim by ketogenic advocates is that raised insulin, even when calories are equal, causes more body fat storage. When you eat carbohydrates, your body secretes insulin. Insulin is an anabolic hormone. As it is anabolic, that means that insulin shuttles nutrients into cells, including fat cells. So the keto hypothesis is that less insulin equals less fat. However, insulin is only one part of the puzzle when it comes to fat loss, and the main part of the puzzle is energy balance. And when you equate energy balance amongst groups, there is no advantage to a high fat diet compared to a high carb diet. However, where high carbs do show an advantage in this scenario is actually for muscle building. As insulin is an anabolic hormone, if you have less anabolic hormones in your body, then that means you're going to build less muscle. And because you need to cap your protein needs to make sure that the excess protein doesn't get converted to glucose on the ketogenic diet, that means that the ketogenic diet is one of the only diets that's scientifically proven to be inferior for muscle gain. Okay, so far, you can't adhere to it that well. It's inferior for muscle building. It may be inferior for fat burning. So will it stop me from getting cancer? Spoiler alert, probably not. There's a myth that cancer tumors can only feed off glucose. The truth is, they can feed off anything. There's some research that ketone supplementation helps survival rates of mice with metastatic cancer, but this has never been replicated in human trials. Fortunately, probably when you think about it, you're not a rat. There are also no substantial studies showing that there's a negative health outcome to increase sugar consumption when calories are equal amongst groups. So you can see the pattern here. Obesity isn't caused by higher carbohydrates, it's caused by higher calories. Higher calories and a higher obesity rate is associated with a lot of health risks, but it isn't the carbohydrates themselves or necessarily the fat. So what about performance? God, I can hear you screaming already. Please, for the love of God, tell me something good about this diet. Well, there is a kind of a good thing about this one. Ketosis allows you to avoid glycogen depletion because you're not relying on glycogen to fuel yourself. You're relying on your body fat, which means you have more of a storage well to draw from in your body. This could, in theory, mitigate the need for things like energy goo or carbohydrate drinks. However, there's a caveat to this. When you utilize glucose for fuel, the glucose is already stored inside your muscle, which means you can use it instantly. It's already inside your muscle. With ketones, you have to break them down within your body before you can use them. So because glucose is instant and it can be instantly utilized and ketones have to be broken down, it's still not an ideal fuel source for the body. But for endurance athletes, it's something you might consider. There is at least one study showing that ketone and carbohydrate supplementation for cyclists beat the carb-only group in competition. So that's definitely worth considering in my opinion. Right, so we're getting onto the good stuff. There's another group of people that may benefit from the ketogenic diet, and that's people with epilepsy. Rats that were exposed to certain ketone esters saw a decrease in seizure rates. So if you suffer from seizures on any consistent basis, I really believe it's worth a try. Having epilepsy can be quite debilitating, so, you know, it's clearly more important than eating sugar if it actually helps your epilepsy. The presence of ketones also seems to improve outcomes from traumatic brain injury, but which might be a recurring pattern here, most of these studies have been done on rats. In regards to the highly sensationalist intro where I showed Goku dying of a heart attack because he ate too much bacon, there isn't any clear-cut evidence that saturated fat is associated with negative health markers, but just because something's not confirmed doesn't mean that it's definitely safe. There's been many studies in the past showing that there's a negative health risk with saturated fat, and now, even though we're coming back with some research that shows it's safe, I think it's always best to err on the side of caution. We just don't know. Now, what I'm getting at here is the ketogenic diet is incredibly high in saturated fat, unless you want to make it even more restrictive, which is also a detriment. These elevated levels of saturated fat could cause health problems such as heart attacks, etc. So I would utilize caution there. I don't think it's as safe as people are making it out. But hypothetically, let's say you also avoided saturated fat intake, and you did everything perfect. The ketogenic diet seems to be safe in the literature. Some exceptions to that rule are alcoholics and diabetics who may not have the bodily machinery to process ketones properly. In conclusion, I do not recommend ketosis for the vast majority of people. I am not a proponent of the ketogenic diet. Ketosis is really well studied because it's easy to study. Put people in a room, don't give them anything but high-fat diets, report, see what happens. The body of evidence is there, and if there was something superior about the ketogenic diet, we would know it by now. It isn't the miracle cure that everyone is making it out to be. It really isn't. In fact, the evidence is showing that it might actually be detrimental to your goals. My advice would be, and it's the advice that I take for myself, is to have a high protein diet, split the carbs and fats between your remaining calorie allowance, split between your preference. I think for adherence that's probably optimal, and that doesn't eliminate any single food group. So to recap, the reason ketosis isn't a miracle cure is because it's only applicable to people with specific health conditions, it's an incredibly hard diet to follow, it's an inefficient fuel source compared to glucose when it comes to athletic endeavours, it blunts the muscle building process, and saturated fat may have negative health outcomes. In short, real Saiyans eat carbs, and they also deadlift really heavy. That's all for now, guys. What are your experiences with a ketogenic diet? I'd love to know. Drop a comment down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And always remember... And
I'm gonna jam it into your head till you buy it!
Put that cookie down! Now!